Okay, this is for Wednesday, lesson 125. First I'm going to review adverb clauses and then we'll look at how to diagram them. So a clause is a sentence part that has its own subject and its own verb. Remember in the last few lessons we talked about phrases. So what's the difference between a phrase and a clause? A phrase does not have its own subject and verb. A phrase might be something like under the bed. And a clause might be something like he was ill. In a clause I have a subject and I have a verb. So that's what makes it a clause. In my phrase here I have a preposition, an adjective, and a noun. But I don't have a subject and verb. There are two types of clauses, the independent clause and the dependent clause. An independent one, it can be a sentence all by itself, whereas a dependent clause can't. It's not a complete thought. For example, an independent clause might be like the clause, he was ill. It's independent. I could put a period at the end and call it a complete sentence. But if I added a word to the beginning, such as while he was ill, now I've changed it to a dependent clause. Because now it's not a complete thought. Now you're wanting more information. If I said to you, while he was ill, you're waiting for me to finish my thought. While he was ill, he couldn't eat. Or while he was ill, he stayed home from school. Whatever. And as you can see, what makes it dependent is this word at the beginning right here. In adverb clauses, which is what our lesson is about, we call this word a subordinating conjunction. And in your book, there's a whole list of them. Things like because he was ill, while, or since he was ill. Some of the subordinating conjunctions are not even one word, they're like three words, like as soon as, or I can't think of the other ones. They're in the book. Anyway, I like to think the reason why they're called subordinating conjunctions is because another name for a dependent clause is a subordinating clause. And if you think about maybe a person in the military who has people under him who report to him, they are his subordinates. They don't have the authority to act alone. They answer to him, right? Well, the subordinate clause doesn't have the authority to be a complete sentence or thought on its own. It has to answer to the dependent clause. So, subordinating. And a conjunction is just a joining word. And this is joining this independent clause to the rest of the sentence, to the independent clause that would be the main sentence. Remember when we covered adjective clauses last week? We had the same thing, but we call those words at the beginning relatives. With an adjective clause, maybe we had a sentence that said, the test, which is tomorrow, is hard, or something. And this right here is an adjective clause because it tells you which one about the word test. We called this word right here a relative in an adjective clause. It's the same principle, it's just that in adverb clauses we call them subordinating conjunctions. So we understand the difference between a phrase and a clause. We understand independent clauses and dependent clauses. What makes a clause an adverb clause? I am so glad you asked. And I'll bet you know the answer. What am I going to say? It's because of what question it asks about what word in the rest of the sentence or in the independent clause, right? So in this sentence here, while he was ill, Dave read The Sinking of the Titanic. While he was ill is a dependent clause. It's not a sentence by itself because of this word right here. It's dependent upon this independent clause. It happens to be an adverb clause. Why? Because it's answering an adverb question about a verb. It's answering a question about the verb read. And the question it's answering is, when? When did Dave read? When was this action of reading done? While he was ill. That makes the whole thing an adverb. And if the whole thing is an adverb, we call it an adverb clause if it's a clause. We call it an adverb phrase if it's a phrase. Or if it's just one word, we just call it an adverb, right? So I'm going to write the list of questions, adverbs, adverb phrases, and adverb clauses answer, and then also remind you what parts of speech they answer them about. Adverbs, for review, answer the questions where, when, how, why, to what extent, under what condition, and they answer those questions about verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. And one last thing to review about adverb clauses. Sometimes part of the clause is missing. Remember we had this before with adjective clauses? And when that happens, it is called an elliptical clause. For example, Joseph plays the drums better than I. I don't play the drums at all. This is about you, Joseph Hornbeck. Joseph, are you watching? We'll find out if you're watching. Joseph plays the drums better than I. What this means is, Joseph plays the drums better than I play the drums. If the thought were to be continued, that's what's missing. So Joseph plays the drums better. Joseph plays the drums or Joseph plays the drums better. Those are independent clauses. They could be. But then I play the drums. This here is a dependent clause. It has a subject I, and if we were to continue the thought, it would have a verb, play. And it has the subordinating conjunction. The whole thing is an adverb clause because it answers the question how about the verb plays. So that makes it an adverb clause. And it's elliptical because this much of the clause right here wasn't written in the sentence. That's all I have for review. In the next video, let's look at how we diagram adverb clauses.